Both Mark and Susan have had professional careers working for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources as conservation biologists. Susan has also done some amazing things and securing millions of dollars for state wildlife grants, and also establishing a great Wisconsin birding and nature trail, which is a web-based project used as a guide to some 350 nature waypoints across Wisconsin. She's also assisted the state listing of Wisconsin's cave bats as threatened because of the white nose syndrome. So congratulations, I'd say, to this couple who have dedicated a lot of their lives and work for our state. So this presentation tonight is going to cover 4 raptor species that carry Madison Audubon tracking transmitters. But now I will relent to Mark to proceed with the heart of this evening's program and introduce you to its 4 other participants. I also want to give a very special thank you to Janie Starzewski, for she has taken a lot of time and effort to put this together technically. And so I appreciate all the work you've done. Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, Diane, for the introduction and for coming up with the idea of the program. She contacted us and said we'd like a program on raptors. So that's how we came to be here tonight. Madison Audubon owns over 2,100 acres of bird habitat that provides a place for the birds and all wildlife and a place for the people to enjoy. You can check out our website to learn more about our sanctuaries and everything that Madison Audubon is doing. And we'll put a plug in for Goose Pond. Emma and I counted birds today at Goose Pond this afternoon. We had 7,300 Canada geese, 4 species of Canada geese, or 4 species of geese. We had over 1,500 tundra swans, and it's impressive to see over 9,000 individual waterfowl at a small area. So if you get a chance, come on up. We're 1 mile south of Arlington in Columbia County. Our goal is to maintain and increase bird numbers. It's important to provide habitat, monitor their populations, and learn more about their ecology and find out what's impacting their health and numbers. Thanks to the members, donors, volunteers, photographers, and staff that provided thousands of hours that volunteer time working on these raptor projects. Thanks also especially to our banders, Gene Jacobs, Janet and Amber Eschenbaugh, Kurt Reed, Bran Smith, the team at Cedar Grove Ornithological Station, including Sue Kaler, Tom Meyer, Rick Hill, and Danny Erickson, and Neil Paparaki with the Rough-Legged Hawk Project. Special thanks to Sue Kaler. Sue was the person that looked on the web and learned about the Rough-Legged Hawk and the Red-tailed Hawk projects and was responsible for having these projects come to Wisconsin. So that was really nice. And we are dedicating the program tonight to our banders, which is similar to on the transmitters. I was just going to mention what they are so everybody doesn't have to mention them. The transmitters contain a solar panel, a battery, a GPS system, and a cell phone. Some transmitters can take the bird's temperature and it can record elevation and flying speed. And Emma will show what a common trap is used to capture hawks and owls. And what we're going to do with questions after each presentation, we're going to have 2 questions. And Drew's going to start. So after his presentation, 2 questions from the audience or by chat. And we'll do that throughout the evening. And then when we get done, if we have time or if there's interest for more questions, we'll go from there. So we'll start with this slide. We're talking about birds of prey, raptors, and it's many different groups. The eagles, Then we've got presentations on the hawks, the falcons, and we're going to end with one owl presentation. So we welcome Drew, and Drew has been monitoring bald eagle nest for over 10 years in Colorado, New York, and Wisconsin. He organized and coordinated a bald eagle nest watch citizens program in New York, and has helped create, put on, and grow a bald eagle nest watch program in Wisconsin with Madison Audubon. So let's go with Drew.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. All right. So just a little bit about me. My name is Drew Cashman. I'm the co-organizer and the Southern Wisconsin coordinator for the Madison Audubon Bald Eagle Nest Watch. Just a little bit about me. We started out the process. I've watched, as Mark said, I've watched nests in 3 states, and we've moved around a little bit. But when we were planning on moving to the Madison area, I reached out to the Madison Audubon about starting a new bald eagle nest watch in the area. Soon after that, they agreed, and we partnered with the Wisconsin DNR and have been working with them back since 2018. This is actually a photo of our first training. So we've come from humble beginnings, starting out in the nest watch, and then have grown from our first year being monitoring about 15 nests, mostly in Dane County, and a few in Sauk and in some of the other surrounding counties. And we had 41 very dedicated volunteers that some of them are still with us to this day, 6 years later. So that's great. And then we grew progressively from there, started in 2019 and 2020, slowly growing and growing. And in 2021, we partnered with the Thousand Islands Environmental Center in the Fox Valley area and started monitoring nests in that area. Once we did that, we pretty much doubled in size. We also partnered with a very passionate group of bald eagle watchers in the southeastern Wisconsin area and brought them into our group. And it's just been growing and growing. As you can see, we've pretty much doubled in size. And then in 2023, we're bringing on 3 more members, Woodlands Dunes, Beaver Creek Reserve, and the Ridges. And now, as you can see in front of you with the map, that we've got a good portion of the states covered. And we're always looking to grow, but we're going and progressing from there. What is the Bald Eagle Nest Watch and what exactly we do? As you can see in this map, the growth of the bald eagle nests within the state has just absolutely blown up back to the days in the 70s when we had the DDT issues. This map is from 2019 that the DNR put out. It's actually filled in quite a bit more since then. So the population has really grown and progressed. But as the population has grown, the DNR has really lost funding, and it's been less of a priority for them. And then we have stepped in and been covering the eagles, monitoring them nests. And they actually announced recently that they are going to no longer do the flyovers that they usually did. They've been doing flyovers of the eagle nest for about 50 years, and they have discontinued that. So the vast majority of the nests that we monitor are, it's just us. It's no longer the DNR watching those nests or doing flyovers or checking them. So we're providing a lot of data to the eagle nests throughout the state. This is just a look at what the volunteers fill out. This is our data sheet that we use unlike if you do watch nest cams, eagle nest cams that are very popular, we don't have that good of a view into the nest, obviously. What we use is mostly the behaviors of the adults. So we're looking for certain behaviors that they're doing that signify certain milestones that progress through the season. What our volunteers do in the southern part of the states, we start in early February. They start monitoring the nest, their adopted nest, for about an hour weekly, through till the end of fledge, if the season's good and everything progresses, usually in June or July, depending on the nest. And then our friends up in the central part of the state, they get started a little bit later. Their birds tend to get started a little bit later because of, obviously a little colder conditions. And so they get started the mid-February in those locations. We have, just a number of different age groups for who volunteers. We have kids, we have retired folks, we have, middle-aged. So it's a very diverse group, but a very passionate group. And, if I see a few of our volunteers on the Zoom, so, thank you. You guys are amazing. We have an amazing group of volunteers that work for us. What do we do for the bald eagle nest watch? The main is, the nuts and bolts of what, recording the data and the productivity of the nest. We also do kind of a secondary thing, and that is advocating for the bald eagle. I thought that was very important when I organized this group, that we do some advocacy for them, give the eagles some voices, and speak for them. So a lot of times we, in more trafficked areas where nests are in parks, we provide nesting signage to educate people. We've had to. It's kind of rare, but we have had to rescue eaglets. It's not always a success, but for instance, Christine Camps rescued this eagle, and that eagle was rehabbed and was re-released. So a lot of times us being out there, save some of the eagles' lives. So it's very exciting for that to happen. The program highlights, we've had a really some really interesting things in the 6 years. These are some of the main highlights. One thing, the Fox Valley actually has 2 trio nests. We don't understand why they do this. Most nests, they'll have their pair, and if another adult comes in the area, they'll chase off that other adult. But for whatever reason, these 2 nests have adopted a 3rd member to their nest. It's extremely rare, and it's very interesting. And they're continuing to monitor these nests and get really cool data on what they're doing. They all interact with each other, and it's kind of very interesting to what's going on. And as I said, it's very rare, and we're not sure why they do it, but hopefully we can at least add some data to it and try to figure out some reasons why they've taken on a 3rd member to their nest pair. I also advocate putting up signs, working with clubs. If a snowmobile trail is too close to a nest, advocating for them, and we've really helped kind of bridge the gap between landowners and humans and eagles, so that we can all interact, and the eagles have enough space to do their thing and raise their young. And then you've probably seen this. Last year was actually the first time that Milwaukee County is the last county in the state of Wisconsin that didn't have an active bald eagle nest. They now have several now that are progressing. Unfortunately, they were all failed last year, but we're hopeful that this year is the year that we have eagle fledglings flying over Milwaukee County for the first time in over 50 years. So that was really exciting. We were at the forefront in monitoring those nests. So that was big news, and hopefully they'll be successful this year. And then this was one of our rescues we had in Sauk. Both the adults disappeared from the nest. We don't know why. They were likely probably lead poisoning or poisoning of some sort. So these eaglets were kind of left alone. We decided we don't usually make this call, but it was kind of a unique situation. We made the call to go rescue this eaglet. He was up in the nest. We recruited some local arborists to climb the tree and rescue this eagle. And then they also found one on the ground that was somehow got to the ground, probably jumped from the nest. And so they rescued those two eagles. They went up to Marge at Reggie, and Reggie actually released them last winter. I think it was in January. So those guys are back, re-released into the wild, and you know, it was kind of it was a really great moment to have them back in the wild after their ordeal. And then last year was a much different year. We've had usually average about 10 to 15% fail rates per year. As you probably all are aware, avian influenza had mutated and was actually pretty deadly to a lot of different birds, and just the nature of what eagles eat and scavenge, with a lot of waterfowl that they eat or scavenge. We unfortunately observed a 65% nest fail last year. We're hopeful for this year, but you know, we'll have to wait and see. It's looking positive so far, but again, we're starting to get migrants coming back into the States, and we'll see what happens, but we're hopeful. So we were at the forefront of collecting that data. It wasn't a whole lot of fun for our volunteers, but they definitely soldiered through it and you know, recorded the data, and I think we're better for it to have that data on what's going on and how it's impacting the nesting eagles. You may have seen this as well. There was one of the Milwaukee County nests. Unfortunately, the female was contracted the avian flu and had to be put down due to her conditioning. So it was a really sad moment. But you know, we're at the forefront of trying to record data and get answers on what's going on with this. And then at the end of the year, we always try to have a party, get together with a number of the volunteers and enjoy the time. Got a great number of volunteers, and it's always exciting to meet everybody and talk about eagles. So for that, I'm all done. So I'll take share, and I'll take any questions that we have. Mark, I think you're muted. Okay, yeah, I can hear you now.
Good. We've got. The question is, did the number of nests go down in 2022, like were adults killed by the flu before nesting season started, or did you have about the same number of nests? For 23, we're talking, sorry, I meant 23. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we did probably lost a few adults. It wasn't as many. We were seeing kind of a pattern where eagles were laying eggs, and then at the time, and then when the eggs were hatching, a week or two into these little eaglets' lives, the nest would fail. So it seems like most of the adults have come unscathed. My guess is they've been in contact with other strands of it that weren't as deadly in the past. So they could have kind of like us in vaccines, they built up a little bit, maybe some immunity, but it seems like most of the adults have gotten through. It was just the eaglets the very small ones that it took its toll on its, you know, pretty quickly. So they were probably bringing in infected ducks or other waterfowl and feeding them to their eaglets, and then it was you know, they were contracting it, and then you know, not surviving, and the nest was failing.
Any other question? There's one in the chat. How much training, Drew, is it required to become a nest watcher?
What we do is we have, it's about an hour session that we do every in January, and it's, you know, it's about an hour. It's pretty easy. We can test it. We can get anybody up to speed for training. It's really recognizing a lot of the behaviors of the adults, seeing when they're incubating, noticing when they've actually risen up a little bit in the nest, and then they're brooding, and they definitely have hatchlings, and then you know, them feeding the eaglets and behaviors like that. So it's about an hour that we do a training session every year, and you know, then we're here. Brenna and I are here to support the members or the volunteers after that with any of their questions, if they come across something like that.
Well, thanks, Drew. Next, we're going to hear from Graham Steinhauer. Graham joined us at Goose Pond in 2018 after graduating from UW-Stevens Point with a degree in forest ecosystem restoration. At Goose Pond Sanctuary, he is our land steward and focuses on land management, citizen science, and public outreach. I hope Graham mentions what it's like to climb a rope 50 feet into the air to reach a red-shouldered hawk nest. He's going to be talking after that also about just a small segment on a Harrier project we have at Goose Pond also. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to start today with the red-shouldered hawk, and this individual is named Arlene. I should mention first that all of the images in this presentation, the red-shouldered hawk and the harrier, were by Arlene Koziel. So thank you so much to her for providing these images. So for identification, you can see the individual on the left really does have those red shoulders. They also usually have some bright orange barring on their chest or upper breast. I'll have another picture of that on the next slide as well, so you can see that a little better. So this is a fairly rare species in Wisconsin. It's state threatened. And you can see that it's basically on the northern edge of its range. There's really only a couple strongholds in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin River is one place, the Mississippi River is another. And then there's some oddball places where they just show up. There's a couple in Madison every once in a while, Door County, northern Wisconsin, there's a couple pockets of them. And then something else to note is that 85 to 90% of individuals migrate out of Wisconsin. And as I said, they're at the northern edge of their range, so most of them will disappear from the state during the winter and then return once again in spring. So another easy way to identify them, or helpful way, is by the habitat that they're in. They really prefer floodplain forests. And so they're looking for a habitat like you will see on the bottom center there. Those are some pretty large open space trees, not much of an understory, and you can see some ponding there too. And that goes a bit with their diet. You can see that individual on the left there has a big lizard in its mouth. They're fairly opportunistic. They'll eat lizards, snakes, small mammals, and then to go along with that floodplain forest or swampland habitat, they also eat a lot of frogs, unlike a lot of raptors. And you can see that fellow there also has those red shoulders and has the orange barring on the chest. One other thing to look for maybe is when they're soaring, their wingtips are pointed slightly forward in more of a reaching position than other soaring hawks. And then just briefly for nesting and breeding on the bottom right there, that's a red-shouldered hawk nest. Generally, they prefer large trees. That one happens to be a shagbark hickory. Those are good ones. Oaks are good. Silver maples sometimes, but the structure is not quite as good for those ones. So if we're going to ban these young, nest access is the first thing. So if you're considering that these nests are between 40 and 60 feet off the ground or so, this is definitely a task. So in this photo here, this is John Jacobs, who has climbed the nest, and the young is looking over the edge, kind of trying to figure out what's happening there, because I'm sure that's a first for that little critter. But so the person climbing will place the young gently into a bag and lower it to the ground, where it can be measured and banded. And so you can see in the top right there, that young bird is getting weighed. It's a really common measurement practice, pretty much always happens with banding. And then at the bottom right there, the actual band is getting fixed, just a small metal anklet with a number on it. And then of course for data, that's important because we know where that bird is from because we've recorded it. And then unfortunately, most band recoveries are after the bird dies, but then we get the data from where it started to where it ended up, and that might include migration or mortality data. So after John climbed this nest, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to climb the next one. It is really hard. Drew mentioned they recruited some arborists to go and work with the eagle nest that he was talking about. A lead line, a big rope goes up there with a pulley system. You have to cinch your way all the way up there. Really a pretty awesome experience though, to be right in the nest, basically, with them looking over at you. And then I just wanted to mention behavior of the young. You can see that bird in the hat. When they're really young, you can just kind of plop them down and they'll just sit right there. They're really quite docile. They don't move around very much. Unlike that bird on the left is maybe really not very much older, probably less than a week. I'm not sure exactly. But then they do start to get a little antsy. And yet pretty much their only defense still is looking grumpy. They don't really do anything. But so there is a bit of a difference with age. So onto transmitters then, of course, you can't put a transmitter on a young bird because it's not large enough yet. So you have to capture an adult, which is arguably harder than the nest climbing thing. So on the left here, we have a great horned owl, Sassy, used as a bait bird, and then the red-shouldered hawk coming in to chase Sassy away. Great horned owls are really neat birds, but they're quite voracious predators on nestlings and even adult hawks of that size, which you might not expect. But if you look really close in that image, there's netting all the way around Sassy encircling her. So she's not in any danger during this process. She's just there as bait to get that hawk to come in. The hawk will get its talons tangled in that netting, and then the person working with the transmitter will come out and gently untangle those talons. And then you can see on the right there, that transmitter is being fixed. So it's quite a lot. It's quite a process. Takes quite a while, but the data that you get from a single transmitter is super valuable. So we want to learn about what these red-shouldered hawks are doing for species management. As I said, they're state threatened. So learning how to better their habitats is definitely a benefit. Migration is something to look at too. So in the center map up there, you see 3 lines heading south. Those are Wisconsin birds migrating. And if you look close, just north of Madison, there is a dot. And that's because Arlene never left. So she is in that 10 to 15% of birds that just don't leave during the winter. So she is a fairly unique bird. And then another thing that we were looking at is home ranges. And that's the map on the left. And these summer home ranges are fairly small. only about 3/4 of a mile in diameter, where they stick most of the summer and a lot of the other year if they choose to stay. So then briefly for the northern harrier, we did not do nearly the same degree of research on this bird, but I definitely think it's notable. The two biggest pieces of ID for me is how they, number one, how they fly. Generally, harriers fly quite low to the ground and really moth-like. They kind of float around. And then another big one is on the right up there, that white rump patch is usually pretty flashy. Those two things combined will usually get you there. I will say though, I don't have a male pictured, and the males are like silvery white colored. They like big grassland habitats, 500 plus acres for nesting, but they can deal with less if they need to. And like other grassland obligates, unfortunately, they're a declining species. So it's a pretty rare thing to get a look at a harrier nest. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology hired Neil and Laura to get some footage of these birds. And so last year, we assisted them in finding a nest and getting them on some fresh birds. This picture of Neil is actually in winter when he came to do a goose pond thing for IMAX Wings Over Water a couple of years ago, but same guy. So the center picture there was actually from a few years ago. And I just happened to stumble upon this nest, took a quick shot of it, and then left. I just got out of there as an accident. The one on the right are the fledglings that Neil and Laura had got to photograph and take videos of. You can see the age is quite a bit different. So I just wanted to mention those things, a pretty neat project, but also nest protection, and that you never want to approach a nest only if it's an accident, it's research related, or perhaps public outreach, but really you don't want to disturb these birds at all.
Thanks, Graham. And we're going to take two questions, but I was just going to mention too, Gene and John Jacobs are probably studying the red-shouldered hawks the longest of anybody probably in North America. They've been going for over 30 years and climbing these nests. And when John climbed that one nest that Graham showed you, John was like 70 years old, climbing up this rope 50 feet into the air. You couldn't climb up the tree. The tree was a big shagbark hickory covered with poison ivy. So it's interesting habitat. So anyway, is there a question for Graham? Either Zoom or in the audience?
When you're up in the nest, do you have any problems with the adults coming in?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The question is, do you have trouble with the adults when you're in the nest? You do. They know you're there. They figure it out pretty soon. Usually they're out hunting. But when they come back, they notice you. They'll swoop at you. Usually they won't actually hit you, but it is a good idea to wear a helmet or some kind of protection. But the main thing that they will do is perch nearby and yell at you a lot. But as I said, we get the young out of the nest and back into it really fast to reduce the stress of those birds as much as we possibly can.
The next question is, where does the great horned owl come from? And the Jacob brothers have a great horned owl that's like 8 years old. It was injured, couldn't fly. And so they raised it from young, and they use it just for this purpose of, they want to trap and band. They banded hundreds probably of red-shouldered hawks, and the only way that they can get them, so the adults we're talking about, is to use the owls. So, and how long do you need to have the owl up before you catch one? Maybe sometimes 30 seconds after everybody's in a blind, and sometimes maybe a little bit longer, but the the adults are really closely watching the nest. So they come right in. So, well, thanks, Nat. And the next speaker is going to be Emma Rosh. And she's been an ecological restoration technician at Goose Pond since last April. Before that, she was a volunteer and summer intern. Emma enjoys working on our many projects, especially those involving banding birds. Welcome, Emma.
Hello, everybody. So I'll be talking about rough-legged hawks. As you can see from the 4 pictures of different hawks, there's a huge amount of variation in color and modeling. So there's dark morph rough-legged hawks and light morph rough-legged hawks. And there's a lot of variation even between those 2 groups. But a couple key identifiers when you're out looking for them is the white tail base, dark tail tip, the little dark splotches at their wrist patches. And another key is that they often will hover when they're hunting, similar to if you're familiar with how kestrels hover in the air. So if you see a large hawk just hovering in place, and maybe they'll do a dive bomb, could be the rough-legged hawk. And as you can see in the range map, they breed in the Arctic, and they winter pretty much all over the United States and southern Canada. Go to the next one. So the key for the habitat for the roughlegs is they really like open landscapes. So in the Arctic, that could be like treeless tundras, and in the wintering locations, anything from prairies, open fields, airports, marshes, anything open is what they prefer. But they also do like some tree lines for roosting in the daytime and nighttime. But so for their diet, they eat typically small mammals. In the Arctic, they'll eat larger mammals as well, like Arctic ground squirrels and young hares, and occasionally some birds like Lapland longspurs. But in their wintering locations around here, they typically eat small mammals like mice, shrews, voles. So that picture is of a rough-legged hawk in its nest. So you can see it's in a pretty rocky edge of a cliff. And so the male chooses the nesting location, which is on the sides of cliffs. And then they build their nest out of really thick twigs, as you can see. Sometimes caribou bones supplement those twigs, and also they line it with grasses, sedges, feathers, things like that. Like other cliff nesting birds, they or I guess they'll share cliffs with other cliff nesting birds like peregrine falcons, gyrfalcons, and common ravens, but they do like to keep about a quarter mile or more from another pair of roughlegs. So how we got involved with the rough-legged hawk project, which was started in 2014 by Jeff Kidd from Kidd Biological Inc., is that a PhD student named Neil Paprocki has been putting transmitters on birds in the eastern US as well as the western. So Jeff Kidd started out by just putting transmitters on birds in the western US, but Neil expanded that to the eastern US and has about 200 birds now in his study. So the 2 birds on this slide are the ones that have transmitters sponsored by Madison Audubon. So we have a representative of the dark morph birds as well as the light morph. So Jeffrey is on the left, it's a male dark morph, and Dorothy is on the right. She is a female light morph. I was lucky enough to go along to help catch Jeffrey, and Graham went last year to catch Dorothy. And so Mark mentioned Sue a little bit already, but without her, we probably would not have had the opportunity to help with this project because she really got it going in Wisconsin and reached out to Neil. So we thank her for that. So this is the trap that we use to capture the hawks. It's called a ball chatry trap. And like you see, it's just a metal trap with a bunch of nooses hanging off the top so that when the bird comes down and pounces on the bait, its legs and talons will get all entwined and it won't be able to get out. You can go to the next one. So once you identify that the hawk is very much trapped and is not going to get out, you speed up to it and start very quickly processing the bird, which refers to doing a bunch of measurements and putting the band and transmitter on. The very first thing that we do is we collected a blood sample, and Neil also collected feather samples for DNA analysis. He swabbed the bird's cloaca, beak, talons, and cheeks for data on the bird's diet and recorded standard measurements like a weight, wing cord length, etc. And then, of course, put the band on the bird and the transmitter. Other key things that Neil does when he processes each bird is he photographs them using these standardized backgrounds to get information on the wing area as well as the plumage color. So the picture on the left has all those squares, so he knows exactly what the area of that square is and then can calculate the wing area. And the plumage color, there's a standardized little color splotch in there. So the key of this study is they're not just putting transmitters on birds for the fun of it, but they're trying to get data on the movement ecology of rough-legged hawks. Specifically, Neil is trying to answer the questions of why there's differential migration in rough-legged hawks and why do individual roughlegs travel different distances. So we don't have a whole lot of data on Jeffrey yet since we put the transmitter on him this year. But in the first weeks of transmitter deployment, he took a trip from White River Marsh State Wildlife Area, which is where we caught and banded him, all the way to 70 miles south of Chicago and back, right back to the same place that we originally banded him, for about 500 miles total, just a casual week trip. And then Dorothy, because she was trapped last year, we already know her spring and fall migration path. So she was trapped at Goose Pond Sanctuary, or near Goose Pond Sanctuary, and she came right back to Goose Pond Sanctuary. So you can see that her summer location was on the eastern coast of Hudson Bay in northern Quebec. And the distance from there to Goose Pond is about 1,175 miles. But as if that, journey wasn't enough, she really caught the eyes of the researchers because of her 114-mile open water crossing across Lake Superior, which was quite the feat, I'd say. But yeah, that's all I've got. If there's any questions.
How far do cell towers go up into Canada where you could download information?
I am not positive, but I know that once they're within cell phone range, all the data will populate and you'll get the information from what you may have missed when it was out of range. Do you have anything to
I
add?
I was gonna mention, like with the snowy owls, their cell towers start showing up in like southern Manitoba. It depends, and sometimes might be cell towers at some of these outlying Native American villages in some places, but usually got to get in southern Ontario or southern Manitoba or southern Saskatchewan. Past that, we don't hear from them until they come back and download their data. Oh, repeat, the question was, what's the distribution of cell towers? When do we hear from these birds? The raptors with transmitters usually call in at least once a week. Sometimes the Project Snowstorm owls call in 3 times a week. And if they happen to be out of a cell tower range or their batteries are bad, hopefully they'll call in the next time or whatever. But usually in southern Canada is where the cell towers show up. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll start with the next speaker is Patrick Reddy. Pat has been monitoring American kestrel boxes for Madison Audubon for 10 years. He has tracked osprey nesting pairs in the Madison area since 1996 and has been involved with the Bluebird Restoration Association for 25 years and has really put in hundreds of hours promoting the bluebirds, giving talks, serving as the president, working on the newsletter. So thanks to Pat for all he's done with all these birds, but he's going to give us a talk about the Kestrel project.
Thanks for having me here. I got involved at Kestrel's, I think about 10 or 12 years ago. Mark asked me when I lived in Stoughton if I would take over some of the boxes or put up some boxes down in that area. And so we started in Stoughton, worked our way toward Oregon, Verona, and Mount Horeb. And I agreed to do 8 boxes and I ended up with 23. So anyway, it's been a fun project. And this is one of the ones I photographed with inside the box here. So next one. So this was actually the title frame for the program tonight too, but it's one of my frames I put together just to show that there's eagles, hawks, falcons, and owls, and the kestrel falls in the falcon family, and it is the smallest falcon in the United States. Here's just shows a illustration of the female upper left there. She's got all the brown on the back and the wings. And the male has the blue wings. So you can kind of tell the difference when you're seeing them. You also notice that the male has the oranger front with spots and the female has white. So here's just a quick thing that I took from the website that we report all our information to, the Peregrine Fund. And it's just the life cycle. The top shows them pairing. Second one, of course, is nesting, the chicks hatching, the chicks growing up, chicks picking out the box. That's kind of fun when you go to check a box and you see 2 or 3 heads sticking out of the opening, and then they fledge. One of the things about kestrels is they like to hover when they hunt. And this is just an illustration that kind of shows one. And I've seen them as much as 100 feet in the air above the prairie, hovering like that. And if they see something, they'll just drop right down and grab like a little mouse or a vole. Of course, we see them along the highways, especially in the wintertime, sitting on power lines. And that's another spot where they can sit and watch for any movement. In the wintertime, there must be a lot of mice and voles and stuff along the roads that cars screw up, because kestrels really know that that's a good place to find their food. And about 95% of their diet is rodent or insects. They do take a few birds, but not a whole lot. Next one. Here's a distribution map, just to show again where they are in the summer, winter, or year round. And I think I see more in winter than I do in summer, just because they're so out there when you're driving on country roads, out on the wires and stuff. All right. So this is one of the maps that the American Kestrel Partnership put together. And this one was 2012. And it takes them a while to get their maps on their website changed and everything. But you can see, particularly look at Wisconsin, you can kind of see the northern quarter of the state has got red, which is indicating decline. And then the bottom 3/4 or so is orange, and there's no change there in 2012. The numbers are indications of, if you look at this on the website, of the types that kind of refers to different habitat that is across the nation that they've been kind of designated finding them in and stuff like that. So I'm guessing 12 is probably more forested, and 23 is going to be more the prairie areas and things like that. Now, there's just recently, I noticed that they upgraded this map. And just remember, look at Wisconsin and the UP and also Minnesota, and then go to the next map there. And now you can see Wisconsin is completely red. So these are based on breeding bird surveys. And so it's indicating that in about 10 years' time now, the entire state has been showing a decline in the kestrel numbers. And it's been happening for about the last 20 years or so. Started up in the northeast part of Canada and the United States, and it's kind of worked its way down to the Midwest. And they still haven't really put a finger on what's causing the decline of kestrels. I did read in one of my birding magazines last winter that they ruled out a lot of things like agricultural chemicals and lack of nesting sites and a few of those things. They think they kind of leaning toward it's happening more on their wintering grounds than it is on their nesting grounds. But when I talked to Janet up at Buena Vista, she wasn't really kind of jumping onto that conclusion just yet. So I think the jury's still out on that one. But we're still doing what we can to put out boxes and increase their numbers here in the southern part of Wisconsin. So this is the system that we use, which I like. It works pretty good. We take an 8-foot 4x4, put it in the ground about 3 to 4 feet. And then with 2 bolts, we attach another 8-foot 4x4 with the box on it. And then you can flip that up right near some wires. And then it's easy to tip it down when you need to at the end of the season to clean it out, and it does need cleaning. Or if you need to re-chip it, if the starlings or something take the chips out, you can tip it down easy enough. And that happens to be one I put in down by Stoughton several years ago. And then got the raccoon guard on it, just so the metal plate on there has the raccoon guard. So when I started monitoring, Madison Audubon gave me some kind of a camera thing with a pole, and I had difficulty working with it because it had so many wires I kept tripping over, and I didn't like the imagery that it gave me. So what I did is I had an old cell phone, and I got a telescoping paint stick, and I just put an L bracket on the end and Velcro, and I Velcro my old cell phone to the top of that, and I just set it for 10-second delay. I go up to the box, stick it inside, and it takes a picture. I get a nice clean shot of what's going on inside. This happens to be a female that didn't like her picture being taken. She's protecting her eggs. They'll actually do this when they got eggs or chicks in the box. They feel that the camera, they can kind of try to do it so I don't make any noise, but it's always something that'll startle them. So this I can also do video if I want to. Here's another female. I happen to have one by Oregon. And I tell you, when I pulled up to that box, she could be a half a mile away. And as soon as I got out of the car, she was 20 feet above my head screaming at me. And the whole summer that I monitored that box. And then I thought, boy, she's just really temperamental. And the following year, about 2 miles down the road, guess who showed up at that box? Because every time I pulled up to that box, she was there. And my wife said I better get a helmet when I check my boxes because she really was afraid this bird was going to attack me. But anyway, it looks like she's got popcorn in her beak, but that just happens to be a wood chip that popped up when she flipped over on her back. Couple shots when you go on a regular basis. Generally in April is when I start monitoring the boxes. I have found eggs in nest boxes by Stoughton in Oregon the first week of April. I think April 2nd might be my earliest that I found eggs in a box. And they can lay eggs all the way up to early June. If there's a failure or if you have some problems with starlings, hang in there. Sometimes the birds might take a little bit before they get access to the box and get the eggs laid. Or it might be a female's there, but they're waiting for a male to show up. It's kind of hard to explain exactly why they don't nest earlier all the time. The one on the right here shows a couple of chicks that are probably less than a week old, and they huddle together probably for safety and warmth. You can see there's quite a few regurgitated pellets in there with mouse hair, that type of thing. When you clean them out, you find bones in there too. Okay. So here's the left one, picture is probably showing them at about 2 weeks old. They're starting to get a little bit of brown coloring on one of them there. So that could be closer to maybe 2.5 weeks old. And then if we click on that checking boxes, will it work or not? I tried to do a video here of just how I do the process. It's going to jump to the web to do a video. Let's see how this works. Yeah, Graham and I worked on this and he got it to pop up. So that's my poll. I'm just doing a video shot here. Those are probably 7 days old, something like that. Okay. All right, and then on the right here, those chicks in that box, you can see the camera can only get a few of them, but you can see they're just about ready to fledge. That's getting pretty close now. And we probably, if we're doing the banding thing, we probably have got those already banded because we try to do it like a week or so, week to 10 days before they're going to be fledging the box. Okay. And then when we do the banding, we go up on a ladder and open the side of the box and just pull them out and put them in a bucket. And you can see in the bucket there, we've got 3 hens, 3 females and 2 males. And they just lie there. They kind of make a peeping noise once in a while. And we put the band on, do the typical measurements that they require. And then this past nesting season, we were pulling feathers off the breast and the backs of the kestrels that we banded because they're doing some kind of a DNA kind of research thing. I don't think we have to do it again this year, do we, Mark? No, we don't. Okay. And then once all that's done, the volunteers that are helping with the banding thing get to take one of them and release the adults I'm talking about now, release them. The chicks, we go back and just put them right back in the box. So that happens to be, it looks like I'm releasing a female there, one of the adults that we banded. So one of the things I found that nest boxes can do is attract other species besides kestrels. And the upper picture there with the blue eggs, that happens to be a bluebird nest that I had. I believe that was at Kegonsa State Park. And I noticed that with the hen didn't like the wood chips. So she spread these grasses really fine over all the wood chips. And then she picked this back corner or back spot to lay her eggs. And I had a second bluebird do that by Oregon. They don't like the wood chips for some reason. The tree swallow down in the bottom there, they don't care about the wood chips. They just find a pocket in the corner. And just like when they build a nest in a bluebird box, they put a bunch of chicken feathers in there, some duck feathers, and they only occupy that one corner of the box. The rest of the wood chips are just left alone. The one on the right there, that's our number one problem, in my opinion. It's a European starling nest. And usually they tend to do is you got 2 inches of wood chips in the box, and that hen, or maybe that's both of them, they remove every single wood chip practically and get down to the bare floor of the box. And then they bring in all this rough grass and feathers and stuff. and then they build their nest, and it's probably only 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep. But the problem is that you don't want to keep having starlings take over boxes and let them raise their young there, because then you just have more starlings taking over more boxes. So when I started doing this, I stopped starlings from nesting. And the best way that I found to do it was to put to get there early enough so that she doesn't lay eggs. You notice that the chips are removed and they're starting to put rough grass in the box. I put a plastic solo cup in the entrance of the nest box, and that keeps the starlings out. And if she lays eggs, then she's really determined. You can wait 3 weeks and pull that cup out and she'll be right back there to nest again. So I think the success of putting cups in the box is really having to check it maybe twice a week to make sure that the starlings are gone. But I've had a lot of success in removing the cup and then having kestrels take the box. And I know that a lot of the monitors from Madison Audubon won't have that much success or agree with that, but I've found a way that it's working. The brand is telling me that one of the things they're suggesting is oiling the eggs of a starling or cracking them and breaking them. And I just don't know what good that's going to do. I don't understand how that would work to get rid of the starlings and bring the kestrels in. So next one. Mark wanted me to put in the data from last year. Well, I guess it's the last 10 years. That just shows how we've been doing. We did have that 2019 COVID season that was a little bit tricky, but still managed to get out there and check the boxes. So 279, it says, for 2022, and 10 years ago, it was 8. Things have changed quite a bit. Of course, we have a lot more boxes now too, from 34 to 221. I believe it's up around 250 or so now. No, not that many. Okay, all right. So anyway, and then there's the banding success on the bottom part there. So one of the hens that we banded at Brooklyn Wildlife this year, we went to band her, and we pulled her out of the box and she had a band on already. And it turns out that she was banded in a box about 2 miles north of where we had captured her this summer. And then we captured the hen at that box on Bellbrook Road. So I think that hen that's at Bellbrook Road, if I could track her with some method, I think she's been there about 5 or 6 years, because I see her there in winter, and then she always takes the same box in the summertime. And then it was one of her offspring that used the box about 2 miles south. So it's kind of fun when you're involved in this, that you kind of pick up on, especially the banding, that you can pick up and see where one has been banded before, or if you have a reclaimed one. So, and the way we do the adults isn't as tricky with all those traps that they showed you with those hawks and everything. All we do is take like a large fishing net that has fine mesh, and we hold it up to the entrance and tap on the box, and the adult will fly out, and you can catch male or female. And then once she's in the net, we bring her down, or bring it down, and do the same measurements and everything else, and put a band on. So kind of fun to do that too. All right. Educating kids. This is kind of how I stumbled upon what Madison Audubon was doing, because I went up to Goose Pond one time, and this busload of kids pulled in, and Mark told me, come on over and see what we're doing here. And so I experienced this group of kids. There was a box on the barn, and they went up and got the chicks out. These are pretty young, probably too young to band, but the day the kids came to look at them was more showing them what we do. Because you have to have the chicks big enough for a band to fit on their legs. So generally at about 16, 17, 18 days old is when you can do it. If you get chicks this small, all you can do is show the kids how cute they are. All right. So down in the upper left picture there is all the measuring that Janet's doing and all the data. The kids are all watching, they're asking questions. They're pretty excited. It was pretty cool to see that. And you can see how they all crowd in there. Some of them have cameras and stuff. So this is probably around 2009 or 10, maybe, I'm guessing. All right. And then, of course, the kids all said, let the teacher release the bird. Now this happens to be the one we trapped in the nest box that's by the railroad tracks. And we were able to go over there and trap the hen that was in that box. So the kids were able to see the babies at the main house on Camping Road. Yeah. And then we went over to the old house on Goose Pond, up Goose Pond Lane there, and captured that hen. And of course, the teacher let it go. That was kind of fun to see that. And let's just hope their future looks bright and that all our efforts are paying off. All right. Does anybody here have questions? Yes.
Do you put the wood chips in the boxes?
Yes. Yep. And
Repeat the question.
she wanted to know if we put the wood chips in the boxes, and yes, we do. Generally by March 1st, we want to have about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of wood chips in there ready for them to use for nesting because they don't build a nest. If you looked at some of those videos or the pictures, the nest gets fouled pretty bad with the chicks in there. And so usually you pick a cold day in fall and you tip your boxes down, and then you don't have to worry about the stench is bad and stuff. You clean out the boxes really good. And that's generally when I put the chips in, is in the fall. And then I went around end of February with my cell phone, and I just went in to make sure that they were the chips were all in there yet. That's something that hadn't removed them or whatever. And a couple of times when I've done that, I've actually found that a screech owl had used the box in the wintertime. And when you look in the box, there's mice. They cache mice in the corner. So you find 2 or 3 mice in the box. But I've never had a screech owl actually nest in the box. They take off after the season starts and the kestrels move in and stuff. So
they put material in there by themselves. They won't like other birds do.
no. She wondered if the kestrels will build their own nest, and they don't. Some hens lay the eggs right on the wooden floor. They move the wood chips aside. I don't know if that's so they can rotate them around better, or if it just happens from their settling and moving in there. But most of them, they'll just pack a spot of it down nice and firm, and then they'll just sit on the eggs there. And I have gone and monitored and found the male sitting in the box too. So they do take turns, but I'd say most of the time it's the female that's in there. Any questions pop up on the thing?
Go.
There's one.
Repeat the question.
Okay. I think we did that, right?
The last one. What's the most
Okay.
interesting crater?
Oh, a snake.
Repeat the question.
Okay, they wanted to know what's the most interesting kestrel prey that remains found in a nest box. And we were banding boxes south of Verona, and Kurt was climbed the ladder, and he reaches in to get the chicks, and all of a sudden he says, "Hey, there's a snake in here," and he pulls it out. Well, first of all, he kind of like jumped on the ladder, I think. Then he went back up, and he slowly pulled it out, and the head was removed from the snake. And I don't know if it was a young hen that dropped this in for the chicks, but obviously it was a garter snake that was about 1 foot long, and the chicks couldn't eat it, so it just sat in there. And then there was another box. I didn't know if it was the same one. I think it was. It had a lot of ants nesting in the lower part of the box, and so beside the snake, all of a sudden he says, "Oh, there's ants all over me," and he's pulling his jacket off, and he's getting bit by these little ants, sand ants or whatever they're called. So anyway, the snake remains was probably the most interesting, but I have found a couple of mouse bones in there, and of course pellets. And then every once in a while you might find the leg of a bird. And it seems to me like it's either a sparrow, like a house sparrow, or a blackbird or something like that, but not too often. You find a few feathers, but To me, they're not really taking that many songbirds. It's mostly little critters. Okay.
Thanks,
All
Pat.
right. Thanks, Mark.
I was going to just mention as a follow-up, one person in the audience asked, how can the public get involved with helping ban kestrels, the young ones? And Madison Audubon has tours that go out. You can look on our website. If you go with the Natural Resource Foundation of Wisconsin, they've got 260 tours this year. In the third weekend of June, you can go banding kestrels in with the Cedar Grove people over in Sheboygan County. You can go to Jackson County with a group. You can go up to Buena Vista with Janet banding birds. So we're trying to get a lot of people out there, and it's a super project to have kids go out and get to hold the young birds. We should mention too is that this is a project that Sue and I started putting up kestrel boxes in 1985 at Goose Pond, and Brand Smith, and we put them up, and we had them up since that when we first started. And Brand Smith retired in 2012, and he then really expanded the program. He's our volunteer coordinator, getting all the volunteers out there. This is an expensive project. We got 220 nest boxes. Each box just for the materials costs us over $60 a box. So we've had donors and we've secured some grant funds for this, but it's really turned out to be a super project. At Goose Pond, we've got 10 boxes. We've got a lot of grassland habitat up there. We've got 10 boxes within a mile of our house, mile and a half of our house. One year we had all 10 boxes occupied, and you can see it makes a difference. You come up there in the springtime, summertime, there's kestrels all over on the wires. So if we can get more people to put up nest boxes, and the nest boxes are real successful. They're nesting in cavities, and the raccoons can get in the cavities and kill the adult or kill the young, you know. So these nest boxes are real successful. The next program or part is going to be on red-tailed hawks, or sorry, snowy owls, I guess. We'll start with the snowy owl. We'll end briefly with the red-tailed hawk. Snowy owls, they're a tundra bird. They come down in the wintertime and they go into the treeless areas, like where the summer in the Arctic, there's no trees. They're like treeless areas looking for small mammals, basically. In the summertime, they're in the Arctic, they're feeding on lemmings. In the wintertime, they're basically feeding on meadow voles in southern Wisconsin or in other wintering areas, except if they're near a great lake that's got open water, then they're hunting ducks. And what some people have learned now, we all think snowy owls, if they come south in the wintertime, it's because they're starving. There's no lemmings or whatever. But one thing they found is that some snowy owls go north in the wintertime to the Arctic Ocean, 24 hours of darkness. There's spots up there called Polinia, small acres of open water with thousands of eiders, big ducks at them, sea ducks. And they hunt sea ducks at 24 hours a day, darkness. They're hunting sea ducks in those areas. But when they come down in an eruption year, everybody thought, oh, the owls are always starving. That's why they come down. There's no food up there. They found out also that they come down in very good production years. There's so many young owls produced. And when you got a lot of lemmings on the breeding grounds, some of these snowy owls can raise 10 to 12 young a year. If there's not many lemmings, they might not nest at all, or they might have one or two. So just because we see them come down doesn't mean they're starving. It could be just so many young coming down. Project Snowstorm started in 2013, coordinating this North American study on snowy owls, putting on transmitters. And so Gene Jacobs, who does the red shoulder, is the only one authorized to put transmitters on in Wisconsin. And so we've put 3 transmitters on at Goose Pond. The first one was called Goose Pond. We caught it. Gene's also working with a group. They don't like them at airports, of course, because they're afraid of killing the owl with a plane and injuring, or if the passengers could get injured if a plane had a problem landing or taking off and that. So they're trying to remove snowy owls from airports. How far do you take them? So we are part of the study. And we went up and helped capture this adult male at the Moseley Airport, released it at Goose Pond, and that's how we were able to get a daytime photo of it, but very difficult to trap. So that was Goose Pond, and we'll mention a couple more owls. One was called Fond du Lac, and this one is where Fond du Lac Audubon paid for the transmitter, and we helped them out. We volunteered. We had volunteers go out to the Green Lake County looking for owls to find out how many were out there. We got Gene out there with some other people going with them, looking for them the night we banded. Most nights we've done quite a bit with this with Gene. Usually it takes 3 nights with people looking, different groups going out there, just searching for owls to get one close to the road that you can trap. Usually in 3 nights, you might catch 1 owl. When we went up there after to catch an owl on the area around Lake Mariah, we caught 3 owls here in 1 night. We were very successful. This is hardcore, intense banding or looking. I mean, we got about 2 hours to find the owl, to trap them. And so we got to put every minute to good use. And this owl Fond du Lac, interesting, we trapped it there. It went up to Door County on Chambers Island off of Lake Michigan, then it came back. So it's interesting, the movement data we're getting. Okay, next one, Columbia. Columbia is an owl that we trapped at Goose Pond, and Kurt in the audience was with us tonight. We trapped it in Graham and trapped it on January 28th, 2020. So far, it's made 6 trips, passages, either spring heading north to the tundra or in fall heading back. It's got a transmitter on, calls in, like I said, 3 times a week, tracks its movements every hour. And so Project Snowstorm has data on this for 1,140 days, totaling 27,000 hourly data points. Really impressive on the work, on what information we can find. And they can find if it's nesting successfully. You can go to the next slide. And the slide on the right is a picture taken of Columbia when she nested her 2nd year. We caught her, she was 3 years old. They don't usually nest till they're 4. 2nd year, she nested in the northern half of Baffin Island. That's a long ways away from Goose Pond. And you can see all the concentrated dots on, that's a very small area. And so she nested successfully. Last year, very few nests were successful in the Arctic. They don't know if it was avian flu, again, or lack of lemmings, but it was very poor nesting success. And that's why we don't have many birds down here this winter. And Columbia, then, when we caught her, is a half mile from Goose Pond. We're just lucky. We caught her about 20 minutes after dark. We had the headlights of the car on, shining on a trap like Emma described, with a pigeon inside the trap, couldn't get injured. And we caught it by 1 talon. That's how much we were just lucky. She came down and pounced on the trap, 1 talon. And Gene and Richard Armstrong with him ran out there right away to get her out of the trap. And but this is where she was the first winter of 20. Next slide. And you can see on the right where she started out in the winter of 19 and 2020. The next year, she spent the whole winter in a small area over in northwest Iowa. Then last winter, she was up between Fargo, North Dakota, and Crookston, Minnesota. This winter, she came back in second week in November. All of a sudden, she came back and she released all of her data points from when she left southern Manitoba last year. Released them all. It might have taken a couple call-ins because she was releasing like 10,000 points or something at a time, a lot of data points. So she came back and she ended up in 40 miles southwest of Winnipeg about the 13th of November. And she called in Sunday night. She's still in that same exact area, maybe a 5 square mile area, basically, where she's hanging out all winter. We expect she's going to head north shortly and hopefully nest. we have a lot of data points on her, and hopefully this will be our 4th summer where we've been tracking her. So it's really an exciting study. Next. So we'll mention briefly about the red-tailed hawk study. This is one that a group is working on. Red-tailed hawks in Wisconsin are common. They can nest in cities, like Madison has nesting red-tailed hawks and that. And there's a study to learn more about the 14 subspecies. They want to learn how they vary and why their color variation changes in that. And some of the red-tailed hawks are migratory and others aren't. Around here, the red-tails are around all winter and all summer. They are not migratory, but we're in the area of the borealis subspecies. And so one way to find out the ones that migrate, you can trap them, and the trapping was done at Cedar Grove Ornithological Station as birds moving down the lake. And they had hoped to get these ones with the green there. I can't pronounce the subspecies name, and to see. They're doing blood work, as Emma mentioned. They're taking blood samples to learn about the genetics of these different subspecies and that. So it's a long-term study that's going on. And the way to trap them is on the migration, because it's hard to go up and find them in the boreal forest when there's no roads. So Madison was the first red-tail that we at Audubon paid for, and it was captured in 21. And like I said, they can record speeds of how fast the bird is moving. Same with the owls. And so this bird was clocked at going 72 miles an hour on a night when the wind they thought was about 3 miles an hour. This bird was flying, and the highest elevation above the ground, one day they clocked it was 6,800 feet. That's about 1.25 miles. It was migrating above ground. You probably didn't even see it if you were out. So next slide. So on the right, on the left, is where it was caught at Cedar Grove. They're hugging the lakeshore coming down. They don't like to fly over the big water. And they came down, and it didn't take 3 weeks, and she was down just south of Louisville, Kentucky. Spent all the time in 1 square mile, basically. And then March 1st, around the 1st of March, she headed north, and then they don't follow the lakeshore necessarily. They actually went not far from Madison, heading north, and this bird ended up, we lost track of it up by Florence County, and we think it's a transmitter problem. Next slide. So you can see in wintertime on the left, this is early data points, but she spent the entire winter, like 4 months, right down there in a real small area, in a subdivision area. I mean, living right around the subdivision. Probably feeding on small mammals, rabbits. And then in summer, this bird was not old enough to nest yet. She didn't nest last summer before we lost contact. She was moving around an area, just a local area, but pretty wide range in distribution. So it's sort of interesting, their movements. Our last bird that they trapped with our Audubon transmitter put on was last October, called Jill. And you can see, went right along the lakeshore. The key is they go along Lake Michigan. They have to head through over Chicago. We hope they don't get in to stop at O'Hare. O'Hare has a trapping program to remove them. They don't like any raptors near the O'Hare airport. So she made it down central Illinois, central Indiana. We think they think the transmitter failed. We lost track of her. So that's what happened there. So does anybody have any questions on the Snowy Owl project? Go to Project Snowstorm. You can learn all about their owls. They've trapped and tagged, transmitted like 100 of them so far. Super data on this stuff. So, or if you have a question on the red tail, or anybody in the audience have a question? On the chat, anybody have a question here? But Steve?
That transmitter on the Snowy Owl, kind of big to me.
Yep. The question is, the transmitter and the snowy owl look pretty big. According to federal Fish and Wildlife rules, regulations, it can only be a certain part of the a certain biomass, certain percent. And when we caught those 3 owls that one night, it was really easy. I said, Gene, how are you going to determine which owl you put it on? He said, we're going to put it on the biggest one. And so, and a lot of times they catch these snowy owls. I said they're hard to trap, maybe 1 in every 3 nights and catch an owl. Maybe 3/4 of the time the owls don't weigh enough to put the transmitter on. So then they just band them and let them go. So that's how that works. Okay, thanks. So we're just going to have a wrap up. Diane? Come closer. Like, well, how much data we share with the university? It's not, well, we aren't sharing the data because it's not our project with these transmitters. University of Idaho is coordinating the rough-legged hawk project. Another university is coordinating the red-tailed hawk project. These are doctor students doing them, and they're doing them at the same university for like 10, 12 years, these projects. They go through a number of doctors and master's students. So also mention with the wrap up, I was going to mention thanks to all the presenters tonight for putting it together. It's a fun project. It's fun for us to go out and trap the birds, and it's fun for the people that go along and help. And we learned a little bit more about these raptors that are luckily around our area in southern Wisconsin. Diane, you have any follow-up comments?
Just a quick. Okay. Well, I would just like to thank everybody who has tuned in tonight, and thank you for all of you who came here in person. And I just want to make a mention that Patrick Reddy, who talked this evening, will be doing a connected program May 13th at 2 o'clock at the Pope Farm Conservancy on the bluebird nesting. So I hope that some of you would like to come out here and enjoy that. So again, thank you to Drew and Emma and Graham and Patrick and you, and
Thanks.
so much.
I was going to say, if you have any questions that you think of them later, you can email goosep@madisonaudubon.org. We'll try and help you out. And the program has also been recorded. So Madison Audubon's going to put it on where anybody can go watch it. You can have other people that couldn't make it tonight. And same with the friends, probably will put it on so we can share it. And so you can share it with your friends and watch it. But thanks for attending by Zoom or in person.